ñu ànd wax Saint Teresa's senior choir jërëjëf ci woyu mari yu rafet yooyu te ci biir programme bi dinañ déglu yeneen woy yi nga xam ne Saint Teresa's senior choir ñoo ko woy jëmale ko ci mari suñu ndey ju laabalaab ci at bu nekk bishop bi mu di bishop Robert Patrick Ellison dina day ñu day jox ay kaddu mun nañ ko ooye ñu ne message mbaate réflexion lu dem ci dundu Mariama duñ def dara rek ñu ñamal leen tuuti ci li nga xam ne moom la bishop bi waxoon lu dem ci Mariama ci feetu Sang Mari ne la ñu ànda ñu déglu.
This year we celebrate Sang Mary in the context of a year of faith. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI decided to ask the whole church throughout the world to make this year a year of faith. The word faith can be very abstract when we try to talk about it or think about it. And so since today we celebrate the glorious Assumption of Our Lady, body and soul, into heaven, let us turn to her who is our perfect model of a living faith. And the most important word there is a living faith. Her Assumption into heaven was clearly the crowning moment of her unique role as Mother of Christ, whereby she cooperated and collaborated fully with him in the mystery of our redemption. And so when we look at the life of Mary, we see a living faith, but we also see in her all that God would like us to be also. In former times, we have often spoken about the need to have a devotion to Mary, by honoring her, by admiring all the great privileges that God gave her. The Immaculate Conception, she is Mother of God, and her Assumption into heaven. However, when we celebrate, for example, her Assumption into heaven, do we ever stop to consider the price Mary paid for this tremendous privilege? The cost of discipleship is always very demanding. And so let us ponder together on this great feast of Sang Mary. Let us take a few key episodes of her real life story as we find them in the Gospels. She herself, we are told especially by Luke, had to ponder all these things in her heart, when so often she could not understand what God was asking of her or where God was taking her. The first of these are these words, "Nothing is impossible to God." It is the story of the Annunciation. Mary is still a young woman, barely 17 years of age. The angel Gabriel takes her by surprise one day and begins to say, "Do not be afraid. You will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus." Initially, needless to say, Mary was very upset. She was disturbed, the evangelist tells us. She was upset. She was very skeptical about such an invitation. She, a young girl of 17, a virgin betrothed to a man called Joseph. The consequences of such would be far too complicated. Nonetheless, the angel continued, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you." And then finally, the angel said, "Nothing is impossible with God." And with these words, Mary surrendered in faith to that huge question that the angel brought to her from God. little did she know what it would imply. How often has God touched my life, in small ways or in big ways? But I can be so cunning or so adept at saying, please God, not that. That's too much for me. And we put limits to his plans and his challenges for each one of us. In such cases, God cannot work within our limits if we do so. If, like Mary, I can believe that with God nothing is possible, then I can begin to push back those boundaries that I am afraid to face up to. Somebody once said, a man is never fully a man until he has stepped beyond a breaking point at some time in his life and comes out on the other side still alive. There are things in life that sometimes we are afraid to do, and at the same time we are unable to accomplish these things. The day that Jesus left home, the evangelists don't tell us anything about this, and so we have to use our imagination. Jesus was about 30 years of age. Joseph was probably dead. So many questions we would like to ask. Perhaps someday, I often thought, I would be able to hear Mary tell her story about this day, how she experienced it. Did Jesus prepare her for this moment? Did he ever share her plans with her? He spent a very long time at home in Nazareth before moving out. He never got married. And then